Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to another episode of The Nick Beasley Show. This will now be a solo show from now on. It'll just be me on live streams, it'll just be me on videos. I will no longer have a co host. Going to keep that private as to why, but no longer going to have a co host here. I will have guests on all the time still, but I will not have a consistent co-host throughout the show anymore. But let's talk about the coaching carousel. And let's get into it with where does the Lane plane land? Now, I'm under the impression Lane Kiffin is leaving Ole Miss. He's gone, right? I think at this point with Lane Kiffin, we have to believe he's gone. I don't want to believe that he's gone, but I believe he's gone. I think Lane is ready to move forward, ready to move on from Ole Miss, go somewhere where he feels he can win a national championship. Up until today, I felt like that was LSU. But they are going to have to pay a buyout to Brian Kelly, meaning less money for Lane. But I don't think it's about money for him. I think it genuinely for Lane Kiffin is about winning. And I think LSU gives him the best chance to win now and in the future because of the recruiting pool he has. And he understands how to recruit in the SEC, and he understands recruiting. So I do think Lane Kiffin is gone. I believe he goes to LSU. If he does not go to LSU, I am looking at John Summerall at Tulane. I think Summerall is one of the best coaches in college football. He has turned Tulane into a very good school. He's got them in position to potentially make the college football playoff. I don't care what you have to offer. If it's not Lane, LSU, go get Summerall from Tulane. I think he's the best candidate for that spot right now. He understands Louisiana. He understands the recruiting base in Louisiana. And he's a winner. He's a proven winner, right? He's won at Tulane. He can win at LSU, I believe. But that's all dictates on where Lane goes. Now, if Lane goes to Florida, now I still think LSU goes to get Summerall. I don't know who Ole Miss gets. I think, though, Lane will either go to LSU or he's going to stay at Ole Miss. Florida, if he does go to LSU, same thing for Florida. I believe go get John Summerall. Again, proven track record at Tulane, knows how to win, knows the area of recruiting. I think you have to go get a guy that can recruit for you, and I believe that is John Summerall. I think he's that good of a coach. And that's where I think, ultimately, if wherever Lane lands, Summerall lands next. Now, if Lane stays at Ole Miss, I still think if I'm LSU, I'm offering Summerall. If Lane lands at Ole Miss and Summerall lands at LSU, if you're Florida, you got to go get one of these high-end coordinators. I believe the right guy to offer the job to I don't know. I actually don't. I don't know who Florida goes and gets now. If Lane stays at Ole Miss and LSU gets Summerall, I don't know where Florida goes. Because I think those are the two highest still kind of available, right? Oklahoma State is hiring North Texas head coach, and Colorado State is taking UConn's head coach. So if you're Florida, you're kind of left in the dust, and maybe you shouldn't have hired Billy Napier. But I don't know where Florida goes if Lane stays at Ole Miss and LSU gets Summerall. I know where they go if Lane goes to LSU. They go to Summerall. If Lane goes to Florida, LSU goes to Summerall, and Ole Miss will figure it out. They'll probably promote somebody from the inside. I do think Lane will coach Ole Miss though through the playoffs, presuming they win Friday night. If they win Friday and then the decision's on Saturday, I still think Lane has earned the right to coach this team through the playoffs. Right? He's been at Ole Miss for 6 years. He's turned them into a very good football team, a very good football program. I think if you're Ole Miss, you tell Lane, look, we know you're leaving, but stay with us through the playoffs. Try to win a national championship. Because then I think the fan base, which is, by the way, ticked off at Lane Kiffin. The Ole Miss fan base is pissed. But I think the fan base will forgive you if you deliver them a championship before you go. I genuinely believe that. They will forgive you because you would have delivered them a championship before leaving. Let's talk about the next topic. Who takes the Auburn job? Now, I truly believe right now that I don't know who takes the Auburn job, actually. Auburn's in a tough spot because, yes, Hugh Freeze needed to go. Now, I do think DJ Durkin, who is currently still at Auburn, should at least be considered, right? The team's looked really good since Hugh's been gone. I think if they win the Iron Bowl, if they win the Iron Bowl, I think you've got your coach. I think DJ Durkin needs to be the head coach at Auburn if they win the Iron Bowl. I think he's there, right? And he knows the program. The kids love him. I think that's the guy that you go to. But if you're Auburn, you're looking for a guy that knows the SEC, knows how to play in the SEC, knows what he's kind of doing a little bit. I don't know that he would leave the school, but I think you take a shot at Mike Bobo at Georgia, right? You need a culture builder, and Georgia's Mike Bobo has learned under Kirby. I think you go see, like, hey man, you want to be a head coach? Like, I'd offer him the money and just see if he leaves. Now, I don't think he'll leave Georgia as a coordinator because it is such a cakewalk job. But, I mean, if he has desire to be a head coach, which I have no information on if he does or not, I think that's the guy you go be like, hey, come be our head coach. I'm not saying it sets you up to beat or beat Georgia or beat Bama, but, like, that could be a guy that you could bring in, develop, to get talent, to work with the offense, to develop your quarterback, your young quarterback. I think Bobo's the way to go. But another name that I think, honestly, I could see him leaving the program is Kane Womack at Alabama. I think Womack, he's a defensive-minded coach, right? He's a DC at Bama. I think he's a guy that would consider a head coaching job at Auburn. Now, would the Bama fan base ever forgive him? No, we wouldn't, and I know that. Do I think he would listen to Auburn at least? Yes. I think those are your two guys. You go try to get a coordinator from one of your rivals. If you can't get DJ Durkin to stay. Now, I think y'all should have kept Hugh Freeze. I'm also a Bama fan, so there's that. Right? That's part of why I think y'all should have kept Hugh Freeze. But that's kind of where I'm at with that one. I think you try to go get one of these coordinators. I honestly, you know what? Maybe you could see if you could pull Mark Stoops away from Kentucky. I doubt it because he's not going anywhere because Kentucky's never going to let him go. But maybe you could see if you could pull him away from there, like just tug a little bit, try to get him to Auburn. Shane Beamer at South Carolina, I think he's probably gone. So you might could take a shot at Shane Beamer. I think if Dabo wanted to coach in the SEC, maybe you could try to pull him away from Clemson. Like, I'm just throwing out ideas here for Auburn of, like, guys that they could go find. There's not really that, because the Auburn job is not, like, nobody looks at the Auburn job and goes, that's what we want. Right? Florida is a top 10 job right now because of the recruiting base you have at that job. LSU is a top 10 job right now, probably top 5, because of what you can do recruiting-wise at LSU and the lore of knowing that, hey, 3 of their last 4 head coaches won championships there. At Auburn, Gus Malzahn, who's probably the most successful out of them, right? Brian Harsin, Hugh Freeze, like that's not a deep pool. If you're Auburn, I don't know where you go at this point, because it's not like people are clamoring for your job. Like nobody wants to. I don't feel like any of the top candidates right now that are being mentioned, and this is why I'm mentioning coordinators, and a guy that's already in your building, a DJ Durkin. None of them are going to want to. None of the top guys are going to want to go there. Summerall, you may be able to get Summerall. Maybe. But you got to act before Saturday. You got to lock him in before Saturday, because after Lane goes and makes his decision, Summerall is the next guy. And everybody's going to be going for him. Everybody. I think if you're Auburn, you got to lock down Summerall right now. Like right this moment. It's my opinion. Let's get to the non-SEC job that might end up being, I think, the most obvious of the hires. Where does Penn State go? I'm telling you right now, if I'm Penn State, I'm calling Brian Daboll. Right? He was the OC at Bama for a while, right? He's been the OC for the Buffalo Bills. He just got fired as the head coach of the New York Giants. I'm calling Brian Daboll because I think that man knows how to win. I think if you give him the right situation with the right amount of money, he can turn around that program. I also think Clark Lee is a guy that I would call if I'm Penn State and try to pull him away from Vanderbilt. Pavia's leaving. I know what he's built at Vanderbilt, but I think Penn State lures him there strictly because of the idea of having an easier shot at getting to the playoffs, right? Because Vandy's really good, but they're on the outside looking in right now, the playoffs, because the SEC is so top-heavy with Georgia and Bama and Oklahoma and Missouri. And I didn't even mention Eli Drinkwitz. Auburn, that's a guy y'all could go get. Eli Drinkwitz at Missouri. I think he would leave that job, which is a good job, and I think he would bring Amon Hardy with him to Auburn, and I think y'all could be set up for success. I think Eli Drinkwitz is a guy. If I'm LSU and I'm Florida, I don't go to Drinkwitz because, from what I understand, the Florida fan base doesn't want Eli Drinkwitz, and for some reason, and I don't think he'd want to coach at those two places. I do think he would consider Auburn. The only issue is you're competing with Kalen DeBoer for recruits at Bama. But speaking of DeBoer, depending on how Saturday night goes, Kalen DeBoer's name has been mentioned in the Penn State head coaching search. That is a name that I've heard mentioned. If I'm Kalen DeBoer, I'm not leaving Alabama to go to Penn State. But everybody remembers the beginning of the year when we lost to Florida State. Our fan base wanted him gone. Like 90% of the fans wanted him out, just gone. Just get out of the state, get away. We lose to Oklahoma, that kind of comes back, right? Not as heavy, but kind of does. If we lose to Auburn, that's 2 straight years that he's been there. That's also 2 straight years that we haven't made the playoffs with him as the coach. And we're losing to our in-state rival. I think the fan base will override the NIL or the buyout, and I think DeBoer will be gone. I'm not a pro DeBoer guy. I thought it was a bad hire from the start. We're in year 2. I love the recruiting class he's bringing in, though, and that's where I have trepidation. If he goes to Penn State, and he hasn't denied that he's not listening to Penn State, but if he goes to Penn State, our recruits go with him. They all do, most of them. And we have a really good recruiting class coming in. Not to mention, we also probably lose Russell, probably lose Austin Mack next year. So that's our two quarterbacks we'd be losing because Ty's going pro. We probably lose a lot of the running backs we have, and we're deep running backs. Well, they're not great, but I do think if he leaves, half our roster goes with him. And the recruiting classes that he's built. Now, do I think if I'm Kalen DeBoer, and I'm like, okay, at Penn State, James Franklin never beat a top 10 team, right? James Franklin never won a national championship, right? James Franklin was very good, but he never got over the hump. At Alabama, I'm being compared to Nick Saban. Saban won all the national championships. Saban won conference championships almost every year. Saban is the greatest coach of all time. If I'm Kalen DeBoer, the Penn State job is almost more allure. Like, I'm more pulled to that job if it's offered, strictly because the pressure's not there. You're no longer pressured, hey, you got to go win. Because at Penn State, they just want, I think they would give him more leeway at Penn State. I think if he has I think this year, kind of will be forgiven. Next year, when it's his quarterback that he recruited, when it's his offense that he's recruited, I think there's a real shot that he's fired if it goes bad next year. Right? Because that'll be his quarterback. Keelan Russell was his quarterback. Is his quarterback. If he fails, DeBoer's gone. I think we give him a 3-year window. That's kind of where college football is at. With the NIL and the transfer portal, it's, hey, you got 3 years. If you can't do something with us for 3 years, you're gone. It's just how it is. It's unfortunate, and it sucks for these coaches. Kind of. I mean, they're getting heavy-ass buyouts. But, like, it does kind of suck because it used to take longer to build a program. Now, it's like you get 3 years, and if we don't compete for a championship, conference championship, national championship, if you're Alabama, we're done. I think at Penn State, they would allow him 5 years to build there. If he doesn't build there, then I think they move on. But now look, I want to see DeBoer stay at Alabama next year because I don't want to go through another coaching search, especially because the only coach that I think would come to Bama will make his decision Saturday, and Bama's not open. I wanted Lane Kiffin. When Nick Saban retired, I wanted Lane Kiffin. We didn't get him. I do not believe that Lane Kiffin would hold out and wait on maybe DeBoer goes to Penn State for the Bama job. I think he would come to Bama if we offered it to him. But that offer is not going to come before Saturday. Right? They'll play Friday. He'll make his decision Saturday. And Saturday night, he'll either be at LSU or Ole Miss, in my opinion. I know he's a Florida kid. I know he's got ties to the school. I know he loves Steve Spurrier. I believe he is going to be at LSU. I have my reasons for believing that. One, I think he could be LSU's Saban. I know Saban coached at LSU. I know he won national championship at LSU. But his legacy, Saban's legacy, is tied to Alabama. He's not called the greatest of all time for what he did at LSU. He's called the greatest of all time for what he did at Alabama. I think that's where that fits in. If you're Penn State, again, I think you got to go. Yeah, I would go call Clark Lee. I'd say, look, dude, we know what you're doing at Vanderbilt. We know you can do that here. We've got more money to invest. Because that's the thing. Penn State is probably a top 5 job because they will pay. They'll pay for players. They did that for James Franklin. They were just impatient with James Franklin. I think they'll learn from their mistake of being impatient with James Franklin the last 2 years. And I know he got to the semifinals last year, and the roster he brought back was incredible. But you know what, though? The mistake he made was he brought back the wrong quarterback. Instead of keeping Bo Prabula, He kept Drew Aller. That was a mistake. You go get Clark Lee, I think he brings the right guy. And I think Clark Lee would leave Vanderbilt for Penn State. I don't think he leaves Vanderbilt for Auburn. Right? I don't think he leaves. Obviously, he might leave for LSU or Florida, but he's not up for those jobs. I don't think. I haven't heard his name mentioned for those two jobs. But that's. I don't know who you go get if you're Auburn, other than Drinkwitz. See if he'll leave Missouri to come to Auburn. But again, with Auburn, it's kind of the same deal with Arkansas. With Arkansas, you're competing with Texas and Texas A&M for recruits, right? Because now they're both in the SEC, and you don't have that, hey, y'all can come play here from the Dallas-Fort Worth area. You can't go, hey, y'all can leave that area, be 5 hours from home, and play in the SEC. Now they don't have to do that. Now they can go to Texas A&M and Texas, stay home, and play in the SEC. For Auburn, you can't say, hey, y'all can come here and play in the SEC and stay close to home, and we have a real chance at winning because Alabama's in the state. Heck, Jacksonville State recruits better than Auburn I think at this point. I truly believe that. I think JSU's a better program than Auburn at this moment. The only thing that Auburn's got really against that they don't, the only thing Auburn's got is they're in the SEC. And you can guarantee that at least one game a year, maybe two games a year are going to be big games. That's Georgia and Bama. And if you win those games, it may not matter what else you do in the rest of the year. That's my opinion on the coaching carousel, guys. Make sure everybody has a happy Thanksgiving. Make sure to tell your family that you love them. Hug them on the neck. Love you guys. Thank y'all for watching. Happy Thanksgiving. Love y'all. Bye.